one of us again can. As we open into this, the experience of this true nature has some qualities. There are no limits. There's no configuration in this spacious awake awareness. It's the confluence of consciousness, and it's arising and overflowing in every moment. And as we know ourselves as that, our frequency shifts from being caught in whatever degree in fear, and then opening into the connection of the one I am, and thou art that, tat vam asi. And we know ourselves as this. The qualities here are what we all long for in our awake awareness. We are already happy. We are already free. We are already in love, already peaceful. Truly, this is the one I am. Knowing ourselves as this, and then noticing the experience, perhaps caught in the mind, or caught up in an apparent external projection with apparent others, we get moved into a frequency of concern, which is an aspect of fear. We can be pulled into a frequency of resistance, which is an aspect of fear. And so, but from this place, from this shared experience now, available to each one of us at any point in time or space, from this shared space, we can open into the realization that if you can see it, you are not it. If you can see it, it's an object, whether it's a frequency of fear or concern, or a frequency of a worry about the future, about subsistence, about connection, about love, anything that creates the frequency of worry or fear. We can see it. We know it as an object. I am not that. We know the witness is the opening into our true nature, into the awake awareness that we are. So anything that we can see, it's being witnessed. And that's the test. If you can see it, you're not it. It's what you have. And if you have it, you can unhave it, right? You can see through it. You can see it as the object, the creation that it is, and then give up resistance to it. It requires resistance in order to continue to create in your experience. And some together today in love. And so it is. an amazing, the nature of reality is amazing in the sense that each one of us can make a shift that changes the world, and not just our world, because there are no separate worlds. What we access in that spaciousness is the possibility, like I said in the opening direction, of coming out of fear, coming home into awareness in which everything arises, regardless of what it is. Awake awareness has no stipulations or limitations on what can show up and be expressed. It always just says yes to whatever we're putting out. So as we come into this place of our own awareness and our own longing to wake up out of fear and wake up out of the reality that fear creates, we can begin to realize that it's I sometimes talk about the early wounding of a child. It's like the little ones, all of us as little ones, had our hands on our hearts, and then something happened and we turned away from ourselves toward an external reality where it looked probably scary, or at least upsetting, or at least mysterious. So now the turning has been, we're now magnetized into an external, and our consideration about ourselves, which we call the childhood wound, is now the denotes the frequency that we're emitting that then shows up as our world. And the next part of that, and all of you have heard this from me at different times, we began to create adaptive behaviors to deal with the projection of fear that was unavoidable in this incarnation into this reality of polarity. And so we've been caught there. And that's been the hall of mirrors and the hell realm of this polarized mind-created reality, where there is no possibility for a person, a me, to find deep satisfaction and happiness. You can't acquire what you already are. And so the turning has to be back to ourselves, coming home to ourselves, turning back to what was already present. Mostly, that's kind of another story, mostly when we incarnated, right? There's karma. We won't talk about that right now. Put that a little side, a little note later, footnote. But so we turned back to the external reality, and now we want to come home. We want to come home to recreate our world, and in the creating of our world, we create a new reality. And that's why we're all committed to this practice, to this journey, to this opening that is being supported around this planet by technology. I don't think consciousness could have shifted collectively before we had, everything, before we had the technology that we have now, which is we're using right here today. Because this is a polarized reality, it's going to be on a stick, and there's going to be a bad end and a good end. We're getting the bad end of the technology. We know about the EMFs and all of the difficulties that it creates for the human body mind. But the other end is the good end. In our own experience, we have to come off that stick. The mind is polarized with the pairs of opposites. And we go meta to that, the apex of that triangle, the base being the polarity. At the apex is meta above that polarity, and it's the place of freedom. It's a place of oneness. It's no longer caught in the polarity. In order to do that, the work that we do together here in shifting out of an identity that's caught in fear and opening into our true nature, where we already are everything that we say that we want. We are already peaceful and easy and happy and free. But the opportunity to live from that, it takes both a turning and a commitment. So that in some of the practices that we do, you're watching your mind, you're noticing if you're triggered, you notice if you're being pulled out of the connection, a feeling of joyfulness, a feeling of love, a feeling of connection, like I said. And using that, we make a small correction. So it's as if we are I think there was a story years ago about this captain on one of these huge ships who said, I never go directly for my goal, for the port that I'm aiming for. It's an ongoing small correction. And that's what's true for us. As we live into our true nature, we're making a small correction in any moment where we're not experiencing peace and love and connection and freedom. We are already that. It's like to realize that you can't acquire something that you already are. Not only would it be redundant, there's no place for it. We don't have to try to get what we say we want if we are already that. So that's the perceptual shift that has to occur. And knowing that, we start to rest here and we have this. Now, what happens, and I'm sure I've been over this many times, but until we're all awake together, it will be repetitive. Yeah. Until we are that, then what we're doing is believing that the external means something about me. It's a problem for me. It looks like I've got to fix it out there. Out there is a projection through the distortion lens of your woundedness. And so we start to back out of that apparent out there, that projection. And backing out of it, we see it clearly. And then we do what's in front of us to do. It's very ordinary because we start to live in this ordinary way with whatever's in front of us to do. For many of us, that might have to do with the body-mind, something that's needed here for more health, for more clarity. And then there may be other things that are out there looking like apparent other people. Where did they come from? Why did they behave that way? So that's the journey that we're on together. And it's the only one that matters, actually, because in this process, which I just described loosely, we're redreaming the world. As the frequency shifts, we know that frequency is the nature of this reality. Quantum physics, its gift to us was to show us that this is a projection, that this is not a materiality that can be moved around and and corrected and then made whole. We are not a person who can have enough psychological insight into our own process in order to get happy. That ain't gonna happen. So through quantum physics, we started to learn that this is a frequency reality. And we know from A Course in Miracles, we know from all of the mystical spiritual teachings that we've been held at a frequency of fear. So our job is to correct that where we are, and the little interstitials where we are caught with a feeling that it shouldn't be that way, or why did they do that? Anytime you're triggered, no matter how big or how small the trigger is, you're being informed about something that's not true. And you have to start to latch onto that. It's like you have to start to allow that to be the information you need to look a little deeper and to see what it is that you're believing about yourself that's not true, because it's creating a world. So collectively, as we come together and we're doing this work, then we will literally, from a higher frequency of connection and love, a different reality will arise. Every one of you in here knows and has had the experience of having a shift in consciousness and then your world changing, right? Can I see your hands? Has everybody had that happen? Yeah. This is an audience participation gig, by the way. Yeah, so we know that as we change, the world changes. What do we change? We change our identity. We shift out of believing that I'm a victim of whatever version, because at the heart of every single wounded conclusion by every single broken-hearted child is the conclusion, there's something wrong with me and somebody else is against me, and basically a victim state. So we use this awareness to come to ourselves, noticing that if there's something that doesn't feel good, first notice what you're thinking. Our frequency is fundamentally, it can be calculated and noticed based on what our thought pattern is, because that's what is emitting the frequency, right? So if you're typically, though, what we'll be going through is it doesn't feel good. I feel uptight. I don't feel welcome. I feel alienated. I feel left out. That feeling was preceded by a thought pattern. So we use the feeling to go to what the thought was, right? And then we take a look at the thought. And then we start to tell ourselves the truth. Who would I be without that thought? Who would I be without that story? What would my experience be? Because if you keep believing that you can correct something out here and have things to be more of what you want, that's a fool in the external, moving the furniture around on the deck of the Titanic. You know, it doesn't change anything because frequency is cause in the matter of this reality. That's the bottom line. That's the premise that you need to emblazon that. Because the minute that you're not aware of that, you feel free to be pissed off, to feel the victim, to feel against something, to feel in resistance. And that frequency is going to continue to show up as a world. Now, because this is a polarized, mind-created reality, the frequency of fear, we sometimes get the good end of the stick. And then we believe that whatever we did in regard to that, maybe we got a lot of money, maybe we got the love of our lives, whatever. And so we're like, all right, this is really working. I really create my own reality and I'm really good at it, right? So yeah, all right, let's give me a moment. And then the other end of the stick comes up because it's a polarity. Yeah. So when we pick up that stick, which is what the nature of the mind is, it's a polarized, good, bad. That was a story of the fall, which was a perfect metaphor for how we're caught now outside the garden, in our mind, not in our own hearts. And so just know that unless you coming home, seeing clearly, because this distortion field begins to disperse, begins to clear when you're no longer caught in the belief about yourself that created you at the frequency of fear, which is a victim identity. I think that was a lot that I just said. So I'm up for topics. All of us together here. I never know what's going to be offered because it comes from all of us together, and whatever shows up, I trust it meets something in all of you, and that we can have an open discussion or topics or questions. Yeah.
I just want to tell you, Thad is here, Camilla is here, Heidi's here, Randy's here, Jillian is here.
Hey,
Sabrina is here.
So who's first?
If you're on Zoom, please go ahead and hit the reactions button to raise your hand, and I will see that, and then I'll spotlight you so Polly can get a quick look. Yeah,
Maybe.
Thaddeus.
Hi.
Hi, honey.
Hi. I guess I just had sort of an observation about my practice recently, which is I feel a little bit, I don't really find any kind of methodology works in terms of witnessing or meditation, except kind of basically just accepting a kind of flow of thoughts without hierarchizing anything. And that's probably the hardest part, is that there's a kind of spiritual, meta observation or a kind of self-congratulations or a sort of a sense of this is correct in my witnessing, that I find that's the thing that I feel stuck on. But if insofar as that can be kind of kept at the same level as the rest of the thoughts, like if I don't inflect any one thing, I feel like there's a kind of good non-resistance that's happening, and it basically I feel in flow and in tune with consciousness. It seems to me that I basically don't feel any longer like there's a permanent solution to an erotic thought uprising, welling up. Like I feel as though there's a kind of a slot in my consciousness for negativity or for fear it's almost like a structural permanency that I kind of accept now. And I haven't felt anything permanently eradicated that negativity or that sense of fear. It's almost like there's a kind of, like I say, like a slot or a niche in my consciousness where fear is going to arise in whatever form. So if I take care of problem X, it'll be problem Y. And now the sense of resignation and non-resistance to that reality of my consciousness has been the big kind of breakthrough for me, even though at some level it's just a kind of, as I say, a non-resistance and a resignation.
Yeah, well, that's it. The welcoming of that which would seem like it was unacceptable in terms of the practice, and what we are opening to, those slots where it never shifts, so it's always negative or it feels like fear. Then the welcoming of that, the allowing of that already moves you, and so you're on. You've got the insight that you need to do that. It's like, let it be whatever it is. It would be as if in this room where we're gathered now, there was a centipede that came in, right? Well, there are plenty of guys in here who could help us just pick it up and take it out. But the whole thing of fear or resistance, which could come up, is exactly the same thing. So it's like it's a creation, and it's showing up. And I think that you're pretty clear about how to handle it, which is not resisting it, looking at it as the creation that it is. I think that typically what happens with negativity is that we invest too much in it. It ties up our attention. Whereas when we can allow it to be whatever it is, without it meaning anything about me or about the I am, which it clearly doesn't mean anything about, then it has the ability to dissipate or to shift, even as a little bit of shifting shape like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you, sweetie. Yeah, sometimes I think there's a kind of high-minded, so what, right? It's like a very cavalier, that's there, it's still that fear thing. But in that ability just to acknowledge it and see it without any resistance, it's already not having the power that it did when we denied or resisted it. And that's true across the board, whether it's in our meditation and our sense of interaction with others. It's just the experience, the freedom to allow everything, because it's in the resistance. What happens with the early wounding, which puts in place the ego identity that's been running the show for at least this lifetime, probably many other lifetimes, is that it's the resistance to that. The minute that I conclude there's something wrong with me, then the resistance is right on it. When it's, and this is just a psychological reality, anything that's resisted will be projected. And so now, if we have, and we have many times, everybody does, things happen, which if it happened to somebody else, they might make a conclusion about themselves, like I don't matter. But it happens to a different person, they don't conclude anything. The person that concludes it means something about me is going to resist it. And then that creates the distortion field. So as we stop resisting whatever is there, it's kind of like, in a way, it's like parenting. If the kid's having a tantrum in the grocery store and you handle it without a lot of resistance or allow a lot of interaction, then it just dissipates. So that's a technique for ourselves too. No resistance. It's not personal. There is no person here. There's awake awareness, and this is the activity of mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like that's also something I've been noticing in Nisargadatta too, in terms of the nature of the body, or the nature of having or being in a body, is that the body is going to do certain things, and it's not personal, and it's not something we have a choice about exactly. We're in a body, and the body is the source of consciousness, the food of consciousness. And when the body's gone, the consciousness will be gone. And, there was a sense of kind of, on his part, a resignation to the phenomenon of having a body, or nature in general. He talks about celibacy, and it didn't stop the rain from coming down. It didn't stop people from having sex. All of that attempt to resist nature was for nothing. The monastic resistance to nature, self-denial, all the history of self-denial, it's come to nothing.
Yeah, resistance comes to nothing. That's what's true. And the allowingness, the openness, the yes, the welcoming allows you not to be separate from it. Resistance separates us from whatever is happening, whether it's in the body or in the world, in a dynamic and relationally or whatever. The idea that the body carries consciousness, actually the body mind arises in consciousness. And so the consciousness is primary, and the body mind is like effect or avatar, whatever. And we know ourselves as this, I have this, I am not this, and not to create a separation, but actually a connection, an honoring, an appreciation for the vehicle, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think there's so much about just the linguistic. I've started to feel so much more conscious of, just the limits of language, and of how approximate it is, and how much different theological or sectarian traditions are really the same thing, with a kind of overlay, a different overlay of language. That the inner experience is the same, which is kind of what I was remarking last time about this, the similitude of consciousness and oneness, and the absence of division and so forth. Yeah. But anyway, I'll stop talking now.
Glad we had this Zoom time, Thad.
I know, it's been great. Thanks for watching, everybody.
It doesn't matter, this whole idea of awakening has been held in spiritual traditions and so forth, because the ego was so caught up in the projection at the level of the problem, so that the sectarian aspect of it, through philosophy or whatever, would get there, right? It would get there, but in the spiritual version, then it's a slippery slope. Both of them are, actually. So it's like we have to go meta, we have to go above our mind's insistence on separation and suffering and resistance. Who's here?
Hey, Mom.
Nobody
Mama,
here.
can you hear me?
Who's that? Yeah.
Can you hear me?
I have my son on. Yes, I can hear you, sweetheart.
Okay, I know. I'm right here.
There you
Oh.
are.
I was thinking about, well, I just wanted to hear you comment on the need to be okay, even. This is sort of at the root of it. And what I appreciate so much about your work, but I don't see much perseverance of it. I think because of people getting stuck maybe with things like maybe needing to be okay, for instance, or some other things associated. I can't put my finger on exactly linguistically maybe, but how from the point of not having those kinds of needs or insistence ourselves having a certain type of experience or understanding things the way we would like better, or how from there there's actually a creative thing that can occur that is the progression of the work that is actually in the void of those other things. Maybe when a true relationship to like synchronicity, nowness, the moment being fully expressed or being enriched with this sort of what I see as the end goal of the work.
Yeah, and that's exact that intersection between what's allowed, what's okay, what's not resisted, and the opening that can come out of that. Yeah, it's such a fundamental aspect of the giving up of resistance, because that's the frequency that really does start to impede possibility. And it also, you know, I always have a caveat. I don't like the new age, you create your own reality, because it tends to engage the ego in trying to make something happen. Am I?
No,
Hang on.
I'm muting them to see if
Okay.
what that is. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. And so when we have the frequency of resistance, which is a subtle but very powerful aspect of the frequency of fear, then we're literally blocking the quantum field. The double slit experiments showed us, quantum physics shows us that matter is configured with observation by a sentient being. So that when we have resistance to anything, it's like we are coagulating the quantum field, which could continue to move and arise and overflow with possibility. But it doesn't do that if there's fear and being engaged, and that's what resistance is. So yeah, the okayness with what is certainly an aware. That's a stepping stone. That's an indicator. It's like, this is just what's happening. It gets to be bigger and more powerful as the me totally falls away, so that this is just what's happening, and there's simply no identification with a separate identity here. That's the goal, that's the work, that's what occurs when the me falls away. That's what we call waking up. It's a simple thing. It's a waking up out of an illusion and into the reality of our true nature. Thank you, Jason.
Linda has a question.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Mama.
Go ahead, Linda.
Is it
Love
muted
you.
still?
Go ahead, Linda.
Hi, Polly.
Yeah.
This is Linda. I'm
Love you,
calling
honey.
in from North Carolina.
Hi, sweetheart. Thank you.
And I don't even know if I can formulate my question right now because I'm in such a space. I don't even know. It's like I went so deep in that meditation. So I'm going to say the question, but I feel like I'm sort of getting the answer as I'm sitting here with you.
Right.
When I'm in my, my day and I'm not on Zoom with you and I'm just in my life and I'm getting really pretty facile or pretty good at sort of going into witness and observing and working with the triggers. But sometimes like my ego goes, well, you're not really in, open awareness or conscious. You're still in the mind. And I'm just wondering, oh God, I don't know if I can put the question together. Like when I'm in the state of what you call awakened awareness, are there different levels of that? Because I feel like I can occupy the witness place, but I don't feel like I'm in that really expanded space, except right now being here with you, I feel like I'm kind of accessing it. So
Right. That's
help me out.
Yeah. Yeah. So everything you're doing is right on. And the mind is always, it's like the serpent in the garden, right? It's going to come in and say, go ahead and take a bite, right? Have another apple. You shall not surely die, right? So the mind is going to be doing its little number. And the whole thing is whatever availability you have for the witness, that's the point of power, because the witness is the opening into true nature. That's what we can know. I sometimes think of it as like that little flashlight that on the WhatsApp thing, where it's shining around, it's looking for the stuff, it's like, but witnessing is, you're already ahead of the game if you're witnessing rather than being had by the conclusion, the suffering. If you're seeing it, that's like pure gold. I mean, I think triggers are pure gold because they take you to what's been underneath that you haven't been able to surface. But the other pure gold is the ability to witness, right? So when we have the trigger and the trigger catches us and grabs us into upset, right? And we use that trigger to go to the early wounding. This is the 6 steps to freedom that I use, or an abbreviated form of it. Then it's the witness that's the way of it, right? But it's also the awareness that the one I have been waiting for, right, is available now because I've seen what happened. I know it happened to what I thought was of me, right? And now I'm witnessing that, and I'm identifying and accessing an aspect of who I truly am as witness. So the witness it's imperative, actually. To be able to witness something already shifts the dynamic between you and it. It sounds like you're doing really good work. Just the
It
awareness
sounds like
of all
I'm
of
doing really good.
what you shared is you're right on schedule, right?
Can I tell you something, that an experience I had this morning?
I agree.
Bree, I'm just going
Please.
to say, I was waking up this morning and I had this experience of really identifying the shift from the sleeping dream to the waking dream. Like I really got the shift. Like there was a space between when I wasn't quite awake, where I started to see the waking dreams start to take a form. But before
Right.
it took form, there was this spaciousness.
Right.
You know what I'm talking about?
Sure.
It was
It
cool.
just hasn't arisen in your consciousness yet, right? It doesn't have reality until it arises in your consciousness.
Yes.
And
then
that was what you were experiencing.
And
Yeah,
it seemed like there needed to be a thought or a word to make it apparently real. Yeah.
Right. That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Good notice. Yeah.
Thank you,
Yeah. The
Polly.
whole dream. Thank you, Glenda. The whole dream thing is such a perfect analogy. This is what we're dreaming right now in this apparent what we call being awake, right? But the minute that we are not projecting this, where we, one of my favorite quotes from Ramana is when a devotee said, "But Guru, what about the others?" And Ramana said, "There are no others," right? It's like I am that. This is what's true. And it's showing up in this way. And it's this myriad creation. And it's the wonder of it all. Yeah. But when we're caught in fear, then it looks like a problem. It looks like an issue. The old Tao Te Ching, I think it's from there, the quote, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. Carry water. Just points to the ordinariness of what happens. You still got a human body, a human mind that's doing things, but now it's at the service of awake awareness. And so the experience of that is like elevated into a frequency, no longer of fear. Before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water was work, and you had to do it to earn your living, right? After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water is just what you're doing. Get the difference? Yeah.
We have time for about one more question, either from someone here or from someone on Zoom.
Can you talk about the difference between the fine line between living on your own behalf and selfishness?
Oh, yeah.
Repeat the question.
Yeah. Bear asked me to make a delineation between being on your own behalf and selfishness. Yeah, that's a great one. Thank you. Yeah, the direction that occurs with our woundedness, I talked about it earlier. It's as if the child is like this, something happens in the external reality, and now we're turned toward the external. At that point, authenticity goes out the window. It's like now we're caught up in the idea of, I've got to be the cute girl, I've got to be the happy person, the kid, the one that helps mommy, the one that entertains daddy when he comes home drunk. So now, once we are turned toward the external, we're caught up in a dynamic of being in reaction and response to the external. So we've left authenticity. We've necessarily left ourselves in order to create what we think we should be to take care of this shit show that the family usually is, right? So when we do that, as we come home, one of the directions that I use in working with people, many of you and I have together done this work, is to get in touch with what does it mean to be on my own behalf? What does it mean to tell myself the truth about what I want, about what's true for me? And because that's energetically what it means to come home to yourself, out of that projected, magnetized into the external, whether I've got to people please or be cute and entertaining or whatever, and back to myself, getting in touch with what do I really want? Fundamentally, what do I want to experience? Yeah. So that turning is very different from the need that I have to get something in order to be okay, which would define selfishness, basically. The feeling I got to get something from out there to be okay is very different from this inside thing, like what's true for me. So I use a little teaching story of you're lying on the sofa, you live on Maui, you're having your tea and you're reading your book, and a friend comes to the door and says, "Hey, Polly, remember you told me we'd go for a hike today?" And in that moment, I have to come really close, realizing my adaptive behavior would be the good girl, would be the loyal friend, get up, get my hiking shoes on and go. When what in truth I wanted was to have my afternoon with my book and my tea. So to be on my own side at that point would be to say, you know, I really apologize because I know I promised you that we'd hike this afternoon, but it just doesn't work for me. And in that authenticity, because that now is a frequency, not a fear. You see the frequency issue here? See, now you're no longer operating from a frequency of fear. You're true north. You're authentically saying what's true for you. That frequency it'll land however it does with the apparent friend. And whatever comes out of that will be at a higher frequency than if you overrode what you wanted and use the collective conditioning of what it means to keep your word, of what it means to be a good friend. Does that make sense? You see the difference? Thank you.
Even if they're disappointed.
Yeah.
You're still in your truth.
Right. And their disappointment may lead to something that's not your business, which can be whatever it's going to be. But you being clear as you can and saying what's true inserts into the quantum field a frequency of authenticity that can have many ramifications. We never know what it means, but because, and this waking up practice is very personal, it's very close, it's very individual, but the shift in frequency creates a new reality. So it can have many, many repercussions that you wouldn't know, but you can trust all of them, no matter what they look like, even if it's the loss of the friendship. Good question, Bear. Thank you.
Okay, it's the top of the hour now. I'm putting in the chat the donations for Polly, if you'd like to do that. Anyone who would like to stay to meditate in silence for the next 45 minutes, either here or on Zoom, you're welcome to. Anything else you want to say, Polly?
No, thank you everybody for joining us today. It's such a group of aliveness and possibility, and You know, it's like acknowledgement of we're all in this together. The joke I make is Lily Tomlin said we're all in this alone. But the reality is that we see and we know and we acknowledge the different aspects that come together on behalf of this shift, on behalf of redreaming this reality. Thank you.
I just don't know if we meditate, we're gonna wake up in half an hour or 20 minutes, all night.
Sure, of course.
Oh. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Mhm.